Hey everybody, welcome back to Daniel's Side of the Story, where I go through that week's chapter of the story, and I just share some of my thoughts, some reflections that I had as I was reading through that week's chapter, just kind of as a way to help spark some discussion in your home, spark some discussion in small group, or maybe just to get you thinking about the chapter, maybe from a perspective that you didn't think of before, right? This is week 23. We're on chapter 23 of the story, and as you can tell from this blue wall, I am back home in Quispam, which is very exciting. That being said, though, as I said last week, a lot of our young adults are still in the middle of the exam season, and it can be a very stressful, busy time for lots of different people, so be sure to keep this group of our church family in your thoughts and your prayers as we are moving through this season of the story. Hey, so as I was reading through chapter 23, I had an interesting thought that came to my mind, or I wasn't really expecting this as I read through this chapter, to be completely honest. But there was a certain theme that grabbed my attention, and that was the theme of the unattractive. And here's what I mean by that. Throughout the chapter, we see unattractive people, we see unattractive places, and we see situations that are unattractive as well. Just a few highlights of that. I mean, John the Baptist, his appearance is it's strange and it's wild, and even his diet seems bizarre, right? This wasn't just, oh, that's the normal in the ancient Near East or, in the Roman time period. No, he was still seen as strange in some ways, even at this point in time as well. But then also when we see Nathaniel, how he hears about the Messiah and how the Messiah has arrived, or someone at least worthy of, asking, is this the Messiah? He hears that this man is called Jesus of Nazareth, and he exclaims, Nazareth? Can anything good come from there? Nazareth is looked down upon. It's unattractive. We also see with the Samaritan woman, when she recognizes that Jesus is a Jew, she's shocked that Jesus would even speak to her. It's an unattractive situation. So throughout the chapter, we seem to see this focus on the unattractive. And the reason that this stuck out to me is actually because there's a significance placed when in Scripture whenever we see someone's visual physical appearance. Whenever that's described, it's usually important for some reason or another. And lately I've spent a lot of time reading through 1st and 2nd Samuel. Now, in the books of Samuel, we see there are 3 particular characters that are described as beautiful or handsome. They're visually attractive people. First one that I'll talk about, there's Saul. He's described as tall and he's handsome, he's strong. He seems visually as the perfect candidate for a king. And then he's made king too. Next up we have David, who's described as handsome and ruddy. He's anointed to be the next king of Israel. And then again we have David's son Absalom, who's described as handsome, and he has beautiful long hair and unblemished skin from the top of his head down to his feet. These are handsome and beautiful characters. And yet throughout the stories, all 3 of these characters fail, and they fail big. Some moments throughout their lives, despite the people seeing them as attractive and beautiful. Again, I think also of judges, when people did what was right in their own eyes. Now we see in Scripture as well when there are moments where people are attractive in the eyes of humanity. And as we read through Scripture, though, we find out that God is far more concerned about one's heart. He's more concerned about someone's faith rather than their outward appearance. We see this in 1 Samuel 16:7. We see it in Psalm 51, verses 16 to 17. Isaiah 53, I think, fits in that category as well. And there's so many more instances where Scripture talks about this. God isn't concerned about visual appearance, outward qualifications. He's more concerned about what's on the inside, about one's heart, one's love for God, one's faith in Him, more concerned about one's character. And in this chapter, we see Jesus spends a lot of time in unattractive places, speaking with unattractive people, and using unattractive situations to proclaim His message. And I also noticed that Jesus takes 12 of His followers, and He personally devotes time to teach them, to prepare them for ministry, and as we see later on, they're the ones responsible for the church at the beginning stages after Jesus leaves them. But these 12 people that Jesus chooses, the 12 people that He decides to invest His time in, they aren't beautiful or attractive religious leaders. Instead, they're fishermen, they're tax collectors, they're zealots. They're the working class and the social pariahs. But despite the unglamorous appearance of these people and these situations, Jesus chooses to work in these environments and situations in order to proclaim His message. We see Jesus expressing His authority through healing on the Sabbath, healing the man's hand. We see Him raising up and healing people with leprosy. He sees people who are paralyzed and He says, "Get up and walk." And He uses each of these moments for a significant reason, to show that He's there for all people, not just the Pharisees like Nicodemus, but also like the woman at the well, the Samaritan who's despised by the Jewish people. And I think also that looking at our own lives today, we have a responsibility in these kind of moments as well, right? We are ordinary people living ordinary lives. And yet at the same time, for those who choose to live and follow Jesus, we are called children of God. And as we go about in our walk, in our everyday life, we're called to have this same level of trust and obedience. And we're given opportunities to work in our ordinary lives. Because if there's something that I've noticed in my own life, is that God likes to use ordinary people living ordinary lives. And through obedience in the ordinary, God will do the extraordinary, right? He'll always take these normal situations, or maybe these unattractive situations, with people who are unqualified or don't deserve something. And He's going to work in a powerful way to proclaim the good news and show who He is to the rest of the world. For those who do know, love, and follow Him, and also for those who don't yet know the good news of Jesus Christ. So as I was reading through the story, that was something that kind of surprised me. I wasn't really thinking that I would learn that today, and yet I was reminded of the importance of the unattractive and the ordinary. From places like Nazareth, from people like Samaritan people, right? As you look in the context, there's all sorts of moments where Jesus sits down and says, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, it's the sick." So too did He come for the sinners, not the righteous. for those who recognize that they are in many ways unattractive and undeserving of God's love. Just like me, and hate to break it to you, but just like you too. We all need Jesus. So that's what stuck out to me as I read through chapter 23 of the story. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope that this gets you thinking about how God is working in the story, both on a lower story perspective, in the narrative, as well as in your own life, and in the upper story, how God is working and moving through it all. Thanks for listening, and I hope that you make the time to have some discussions about this chapter. This isn't a story that we're supposed to work through on our own, but as a church family, a gathering of believers. Until next week, bye for now.